Listen, Bo Bichette's free agency just took a massive turn, and we need to talk about what this means for the Blue Jays and where this whole situation is headed, because something significant happened yesterday that has everyone reevaluating where Bo stands in this market, and the implications are huge. Here's what went down. Bo had a Zoom call with the Boston Red Sox. Initial reports suggested it went well, which obviously wasn't great news if you're a Blue Jays fan hoping to bring him back. But then, almost immediately after, everything changed. According to MLB insider Julian Mack from CBS Sports, the Red Sox are now completely out on Bo Bichette unless his market changes drastically. Think about that for a second. They go from having what seemed like a productive conversation to walking away entirely. What happened in between those 2 points? This tells us something crucial about where Bo's asking price is versus where teams are valuing him. My theory, and I think this makes the most sense, is that the term is the bigger sticking point than the average annual value. Teams might be willing to pay Bo well per season, but committing to 7 or 8 years for a player with his defensive limitations and injury history, that's where organizations are pumping the brakes. Let me be clear about something before we go any further. I love Bo Bichette as a player. I love watching him hit. The bat-to-ball skills are elite. The ability to drive in runs in clutch situations is something you can't teach, and he's been the heartbeat of this team for years. But free agency strips away the emotional attachment. It becomes purely business, and teams are evaluating every aspect of his game, not just the offense. When you break down Bo's complete profile, the hitting is undeniable. Look at the numbers over his career. In 2021, he had 191 hits. In 2022, 189 hits. In 2023, 175 hits. This past season, 181 hits. The RBI production is consistent, 122, 93, 73, 94 across those same years. His batting averages have been ridiculous, 289, 290, 306, 311. The OPS numbers are solid too, 828, 802, 814, 840. This is a guy who gets on base and produces runs. That's exactly what you want in a lineup, but here's where it gets complicated. The defense is a legitimate problem. Bo's range at shortstop is poor. The defensive runs saved, the outs above average, all of it paints a picture of one of the worst defensive shortstops in baseball. His arm strength is mediocre at best. He's not a base-stealing threat, which also affects his ability to take extra bases. So essentially, you're paying for the bat, and teams are asking themselves, is that bat alone worth what Bo thinks he's worth? The other factor teams are considering is the injury history. Lower body injuries have limited him, and those tend to be recurring issues that can affect a player's ability to stay on the field consistently. When you're talking about a 7-year commitment worth over $200 million, teams want to know they're getting a player who's going to be available, not someone who's going to spend significant time on the injured list. So what does this mean for Bo's market? Right now, it looks softer than anyone anticipated. Keegan Matheson came out and said he doesn't get any sense that Bo's market is surging. Translation, teams aren't lining up to overpay. This is probably surprising to Bo and his camp, who likely expected more competition after the season he had, especially given his playoff performance. Here's where it gets interesting. If Bo's market isn't exploding the way he hoped, does he consider taking a shorter-term deal with a higher annual value? Think about the Alex Bregman situation. Everyone expected Bregman to get that massive 7 or 8 year contract, but instead, he took 3 years with player opt-outs. Maybe Bo looks at something similar, a 3 or 4 year deal in the $35 million per year range. If he performs well, he hits free agency again at 30 or 31 and gets another payday. If things don't go as planned, he's still got the security of that initial deal. For Toronto, a shorter-term contract might actually be more palatable than 7 years. You're not committing to Bo's decline years, and if you're planning to play him at second base with Andres Gimenez at short, you're maximizing the defensive alignment. The problem is, does Bo see moving to second base as a demotion? From a status perspective, probably. But if he truly wants to win and be on a competitive team, sometimes you have to make those adjustments. And that brings us back to what this means for the Blue Jays specifically. If the Red Sox are out and Bo's market isn't as hot as expected, does that make it easier for Toronto to bring him back at a reasonable number? Or does it raise red flags for the Blue Jays front office that other teams aren't willing to pay what Bo's asking? It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, less competition means you're not in a bidding war. On the other hand, If nobody else is willing to pay that price, maybe there's something they're seeing that makes them hesitant. The other consideration is Kyle Tucker. If Bo's price comes down and suddenly he's more affordable than originally anticipated, does that open the door for Toronto to pursue both him and Tucker? I'm not saying it's likely. I still think the chances of landing both are somewhere in that 5 to 15% range. But if Bo's market continues to soften, it at least becomes more feasible from a financial standpoint. One thing I keep coming back to is Bo's value in clutch situations. When you look at his stats with runners in scoring position, it's absurd. Career 330 batting average in those spots, 148 weighted runs created plus. His OPS with runners in scoring position is 904. These aren't marginal improvements. This is elite production when it matters most. If I'm building a lineup and I need someone up with the game on the line, Bo's absolutely one of my top choices. That's worth something, even if the defense is lacking. But the reality is offense isn't the only thing that matters in baseball. Teams are paying for complete players, and Bo isn't a complete player. He's an elite hitter who struggles defensively. Compare that to someone like Kyle Tucker, who gives you plus defense in the outfield along with the offensive production. That's why Tucker's market is probably going to be stronger, even though Bo's hitting numbers are right there with anyone. The Red Sox dropping out is significant because they're a team that needs offensive help. They have money to spend, and they were clearly interested enough to have an extended conversation. For them to walk away suggests the gap between what Bo wants and what they're willing to offer is substantial, whether that's term dollars per year or some combination of both. It's a bad sign for Bo's leverage in negotiations. Now, I want to be careful not to overreact to one report. Julian Mack is a credible reporter from CBS Sports, but we've seen situations where information changes quickly or teams posture in certain ways for leverage. Maybe the Red Sox leaking that they're out is a negotiating tactic. Maybe there's more to the story we don't know, but right now, based on what's being reported, it looks like Bo's market isn't developing the way he hoped. What I find most interesting is how quiet things have been around Bo compared to other free agents. With Tucker, we're hearing regular updates about which teams are involved, what the contract parameters might look like, all of that. With Bo, it's been radio silence until this Red Sox news dropped. That silence usually means one of two things. Either there's so much interest that teams are keeping things tight to maintain leverage, or there isn't much happening at all. Given what we're hearing now, it seems like the latter. Free agency is Bo's right after not signing an extension. He earned the ability to test his market, to talk with every team, to see what his value is across the league. But sometimes when you test the market, you don't like what you find. The player and their representation have an idea of what they're worth, and the league has a different valuation. Finding that middle ground is where deals get done. But if the gap is too wide, it can lead to extended negotiations or a player settling for less than anticipated. For Blue Jays fans, this creates an interesting dynamic. Do you want Bo back? Absolutely, most fans do. Is it worth 7 years and $250 million? That's where the debate gets heated. Some fans say pay whatever it takes. He's earned it. He's a cornerstone of this team. Others look at the complete picture and say you can't commit that much money to a player with his defensive limitations. Both perspectives have merit. The other piece of this is what happens if the Blue Jays don't bring Bo back and don't land Kyle Tucker. That's worst-case scenario territory. You're losing your starting shortstop and not replacing him with another impact bat. The alternatives aren't great. Hassan Kim is available, but coming off a down year. Alex Bregman is out there, and he'd be an upgrade defensively at third. But then you're moving Addison Barger to the outfield, and you still have a hole at short. Cody Bellinger is available, but he's had his own struggles. There's no one in free agency who replicates what Bo brings offensively. That World Series run proved this team is close. You don't blow that up and hope for the best. You add to it, you make it better, you go for it while the window is open. Vladdy's extension is done. Dylan Cease is locked in. The rotation has real potential. This is the time to be aggressive, not the time to let key pieces walk and hope you can fill the gaps with lesser options. But being aggressive doesn't mean being reckless. If Bo's asking for 8 years at $260 million and the market is telling you that's an overpay, do you do it anyway because of what he's meant to the organization? Or do you stick to your valuation and risk losing him? And these are the decisions that define front offices. The winter meetings have been relatively quiet for Toronto so far. Dylan Cease's introductory press conference was great. Hearing him talk about the organization, the development staff, the winning culture, all of that was positive. Scott Boras even chimed in about how Cease was impressed by the Blue Jays' ability to help pitchers develop and improve. That's the kind of stuff that helps with future free agent recruiting. But in terms of major additions, nothing has happened yet. The bullpen is another area that needs attention. Some of the top relief options are already gone. Devin Williams signed with the Mets, which creates its own drama with Edwin Diaz. Robert Suarez is off the board. Pete Fairbanks, Luke Weaver, Tyler Rogers are still available, but none of them are game changers by themselves. If the Blue Jays are serious about contending, they need at least one more quality bullpen arm, probably two. And speaking of additions, Pete Alonso signing with the Orioles is brutal for the division. The AL East just keeps getting tougher. Baltimore already had a loaded lineup with Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg, and now they add Alonso's power. That's going to be a problem. Meanwhile, the Yankees have been completely silent in free agency, which is hilarious as a Blue Jays fan, but also kind of surprising. The Red Sox are making moves. The Orioles are making moves. Toronto has made moves. New York is just sitting there. The Rule 5 draft brought in some intriguing pieces. Spencer Miles from the Giants is a pure stuff pitcher with upside. Edbert Perez from the Brewers was once a top prospect. These aren't headline-grabbing additions, but they're the kind of depth moves that can pay off if one of these guys develops. Angel Perdomo from last year's Rule 5 draft is another example of finding value in unexpected places. David Popkins winning Baseball America's MLB Coach of the Year is well-deserved recognition for what he accomplished with this offense. The transformation from 2024 to 2025 was night and day. Springer had a resurgence. Barger broke out. Ernie Clement had a career year. Vladdy was phenomenal. Popkins deserves credit for creating an approach that worked across the entire lineup. Losing him would be devastating, and hopefully Toronto does whatever it takes to keep him around. But the biggest storyline remains Bo and Tucker. Everything else is secondary until those situations resolve. If the Blue Jays land Tucker, that's a massive win. If they bring Bo back at a reasonable number, that's ideal. If they somehow get both, the fan base will lose its mind. But if they miss on both, this offseason becomes a disaster regardless of what other moves they make. The next few weeks are critical. Bo's market might stay soft, which gives Toronto leverage, or another team could jump in with an offer that blows everyone away and suddenly he's gone. Tucker's situation could develop quickly, with a team meeting his asking price and ending the speculation, or it could drag into January as teams try to outlast each other. What I keep coming back to is this. The Blue Jays were one win away from the World Series. That's not a team that needs a complete overhaul. That's a team that needs targeted improvements. Adding Tucker makes them better. Keeping Bo makes them better. Doing both makes them legitimate favorites. But standing pat or making marginal additions while the division gets stronger, that's how you waste a competitive window. This Bo situation is fascinating because it's challenging a lot of assumptions about his value. He's been so good for so long in Toronto that maybe we all overestimated what his market would be. Or maybe teams are just being more cautious in general, not wanting to commit massive money to players with question marks. Either way, it's shaping up to be one of the more interesting free agent sagas of the offseason, and we're right in the middle of it as Blue Jays fans.